This is Jenny Bell from Clarington, Ohio, and I'm listening to Barbecue Central.
Let's go!
We'll do it live. Okay. Well, do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live!
So to get that perfect barbecue, you use wood. Are you sure it's safe? Whatever. We put the lighter fluid on, strike the match, and... Oh! Should we call the fire department? That might be a good idea.
Good evening and welcome to the Really Big Barbecue Central Show. This is the show that talks about all things that are important to the world of barbecue and grilling. The show originating from the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame city, Bomb City, USA, Cleveland, Ohio, the barbecue capital of the North Coast. I'm your program host, Greg Rempe. Happy to have you aboard here on your Tuesday evenings, the live fire fun and frivolity show. If you'd like to get in contact with the show this evening, or if you would like to follow the show during off-show hours, here's how you do all of that.
You can get in touch with the show by sending an email to Greg at bbqcentralshow.com. Follow us on all the social media channels at BBQ Central Show. And be sure to subscribe to the show podcast feed on your favorite podcast platform.
Everything else you want to find out about the show can be found at the main website, thebbqcentralshow.com. And here's what's happening in case you can get the newsletter. If you are a fan of the show, a longtime fan of the show, you know what's happening here in the first hour. No surprise, it's the second Tuesday of a month. And within the confines of the first hour, you will find in about 12 minutes from now, the creator of AmazingRibs.com, Meathead. Especially important for the noobs that are joining us into the barbecue live fire circuit. We're going to be teaching you all about brining and osmosis and injections and things that they do and don't do, a little debunking of old wives' tales, all that fun stuff. So especially if you are newer to the game, sooner or later somebody's going to say, well, do you brine your chicken or your poultry? And you're going to go, I don't even know what that means. We'll help you get there right off the bat. 35 past the first hour, our pal and contributing barbecue editor to Southern Living Magazine and runner of RobertFMoss.com, Robert Moss. We continue what has been 8 months or going on 8 months of incredibly insightful, thoughtful, and very important barbecue information. And tonight, we are going to be talking specifically about tracing influences and adaptations of Southern barbecue outside of the region. Not inside, outside. So always looking forward to seeing what Robert Moss brings to the table here from a discussion and teachability standpoint. That'll close the first hour. We'll move to the second hour. Joining me for the first time, the creator of a YouTube channel and website called The Barbecue Lab, David Gafford, joins us. Really looking forward to getting the backstory of the Barbecue Lab from Dave. Met him in person at the ThermalWorks event in Utah a month or two ago. And if things pan out and I don't offend him, and both of those things could happen, I suppose, I see recurring guest Dave from the Barbecue Lab early and often. He's getting his hands on a whole bunch of cool stuff. He does really good reviews, unbiased reviews. I've watched a number of the videos there on YouTube, so excited to have David on here for the first time. 14 past the second hour, and then coming out of the bullpen. When I have the opportunity to promote Cleveland, I'm always promoting Cleveland. Back for his second appearance on the show, Darren Carter from Carter's Barbecue. We're going to talk about a little web episode miniseries type thing that GoDaddy put on. Made in America, I believe is what it's called, or Working in America, something along these lines. And he's going to tell us all about the experience and how he got the opportunity and perhaps what he would do different if he had it all over to do again. So there you go. Meathead and Robert Moss first hour, David Gafford from the Barbecue Lab, and Darren Carter from Carter's Barbecue in the second hour. Don't forget you can follow me socially, Instagram, the Twitter, TikTok, Snapper Snaps, and the LinkedIns, all with the handle at BBQ Central Show. And, of course, we say good evening to those of you watching tonight through one of our video streaming platforms. You can go to facebook.com/BBQ Central Show or twitter.com/BBQ Central Show. Or you can watch on YouTube, which is youtube.com/@BBQ Central Show. And we have a new YouTube poll question of the week that we're asking everybody that's watching through YouTube. And, of course, we'll ask all guests here this evening. The burning question is, have you purchased a bottle of Doug Scheiding's rubs yet? And currently 69% of you are saying no. In the early voting, it was 50-50 all the way through 6 or 7 votes. So this show proving to be a revenue top-line generator for our pal Doug Scheiding over at Rogue Cookers. I encourage you to give them a try. They're really good. Results of the poll question from now 2 weeks ago. Do you remove the membrane on spare ribs? 92% of you finished by saying yes, you do. But I'm going to be now the 8% that said no. According to Aaron Franklin, I'm wasting my time. We'll leave the membrane on. Maybe I'll ask Meathead and Robert Moss about that as well. So we'll start here tonight, and a lot of things have happened over the past week and a half. And while I could easily talk about the computer crash of 2024, I can leave that for a later show or another show altogether and talk about what happened halfway through the interview when Doug was on a couple weeks ago. Tonight, though, I will start on a different topic. And this is not a barbecue and grilling related take. It's about one of the best people I have ever had the privilege of getting to know during my 50 years of life. Her name is Jenny Bell. In fact, you heard her during the open of the show with the ID, Jenny Bell from Clarington, Ohio. If you missed it, it's this.
Hello, this is Jenny Bell from Clarington, Ohio, and I'm listening to Barbecue Central.
Jenny passed away a week ago this past Saturday. Not a surprise to those of us that knew her and knew the condition that she was in, declining rapidly over the past few weeks, suffering from Alzheimer's and, honestly, just old age to a degree. She lived 96 great years. I would say at least 90 of them, maybe a few more, done on her terms and her terms alone, with her wits and her faculties and her charm with her. Few can say that when they get to that age. Usually it degrades well before that, and there's no quality of life, but not her. Becky and I, my wife, went to see her the Friday before she passed away, like the day before. So she passed away the next day around 6 p.m. that Saturday. Certainly, I'm very happy that I got to see her one last time when my wife was like, we're going to go and see, because it sounds like it's getting close. I was ready to go. Like, can we leave fast enough? No. So we got down there and got to see her in a different state than we would normally see her, of course. But it was great to see her one last time. But if I'm being honest, it would never be enough. When that quality of a person is in your life, seeing them a few times a year isn't enough. Seeing them once a month isn't enough. Hell, for the people that see her every day, it probably wasn't enough. That's the impact that Jenny made on the people that she knew, both friends, family, everybody included, especially the family. I would say the impact immeasurable. When I think about a singular word to describe Jenny, the word selfless immediately comes to me. A loyal wife, a dedicated mother, I could go on and on about how great of a grandmother and great-grandmother she was, always ready to watch any and all of the grandkids, help anybody, support anybody that needed support, always willing to cook, clean, do whatever it took or whatever was needed for those around her. And her ability to entertain was second to none. I remember distinctly visiting while I was in college with Becky. It was like going to food heaven. And for those that went to college, food wasn't always that great. So getting a superior quality of food from the second you walked in the door, food was ready to eat. There was also food being made. There was also food being game planned for later in that visit, whether it was 24 hours or 48 hours or a week. No one ever left that house hungry, ever. You couldn't possibly. And it wasn't that you felt bad for saying no. It's that the food was so good, you couldn't say no. There was no arm twisting or guilting or anything like that. It's just that everything was great. So you had no problem eating like a fatso. She's a person who does the thing that few do. First, she was a living legend. I don't know how many people I could sit here and say, you know, that person, a living legend, somebody that is bigger than life, that people talk about while they're here on earth, a living legend. And now, due to the people who are left behind and who continue to live, they will continue to tell the stories of how great Jenny Bell was, how great her food was, how great of a person she was. And when you pass away and there are legions of fans left on this earth, you transition into something that very few people get to transition into, which is attaining the status of immortality. There is no doubt in my mind that years from now, there will be somebody who didn't even know Jenny Bell in person, never met her, didn't have an interaction with her, or could share an anecdote. But there are so many fans around Southern Ohio who knew her and experienced her that they're telling everybody about Jenny Bell. There's no doubt in my mind that at some point in years to come, somebody who had no firsthand experience with her is going to tell a Jenny Bell story because it impacted them that much. Just the story being told to them. That's immortal status right there. That doesn't happen a lot. To go from living legend to immortal status. It's special. There were very few like her. And she wasn't even my flesh and blood grandmother. But she is somebody that impacted me greatly, taught me how to be a good human, taught me how to be thankful, taught me how to be compassionate, not be vengeful. All the greatest qualities in a human being that you would like to see, she embodied. So her attaining this immortal status that I'm talking about, a cinch, she's a shoo-in for that. And it's no surprise to me. So, Jenny, one last time from us here at the Barbecue Central Show. We love you. And we're going to miss you. So that's why there was no show last week. But we have a meathead in the green room. We have brining on the agenda. And we have a YouTube poll question of the week to get to as well. But before we do that, we're welcoming back who? Our pals over at Schwank Grills. That's right. We welcome back Schwank. Gang, check out the grill that everybody is talking about, still talking about, since the last time they sponsored. You continue to see it all over websites, social media, the Schwenk grill. What do you need to know? The unit heats up to 1,500 degrees using infrared burner technology. More on that here in a second. What does that mean to you? Now you can grill the juiciest steaks you've ever tasted in as little as 40 minutes? No. 10 minutes? Don't even think about it. How about 3 to 4 minutes, depending on thickness? No more wasting your life cooking the proteins you want. Schwenk Grill does it quickly and with great results. Now, let's address that infrared burner technology. It happens to be the same technology that's used in steakhouses like Morton's, Del Frisco's, Cut 432, and the list goes on. And this isn't just the same type. It's the same Schwenk burner system. Same thing, except now it's on your backyard. Instead of having to go to the expensive steakhouses, you can do it right there. Remember, at 1,500 degrees, you can build a delicious crust on both sides of the steak without overcooking. Also, the steak incredibly juicy and flavorful. Truly, there's no other grill like it on the market right now. Some are calling it the future of grilling. It's not just a steak cooking machine. You can also do delicate fish fillets like salmon. You can do chicken. You can do vegetables. You can do it all, even pizza, like it's showing right there on the video. Here's the deal that you want. You can save $150 off when you go to schwenkgrills.com and you use promo code BBQ Central. That's promo code BBQ Central at checkout, and it saves you $150 off a Schwenk grill. It's that easy to save money and enjoy restaurant quality heat. You can also get a link in the show notes, on the show newsletter, or you can go to the homepage and click on the Schwenk Grills logo. Many different ways to get there. Just make sure you're using promo code BBQ Central at checkout so you can save your $150. Meathead is next. Stick around. We'll be right back.
You're listening to the BBQ Central Show. Broadcasting live from the BBQ Central Show studios in Cleveland, Ohio. You're listening to the BBQ Central Show. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
Welcome back. This portion of the show being brought to you by cookinpellets.com, your number one source for quality wood pellets for all your pellet-driven cookers. You visit cookinpellets.com for more information or to peruse what they're offering. And then when you're ready to buy, do the complete opposite of what you should do everywhere else. Leave the website and instead go to Amazon.com or Lowe's.com or Walmart.com. Same great products, just much better shipping rates, as told to be my CB over at Cookin' Pellets. My first guest tonight has created one of the most heavily trafficked barbecue and grilling websites on the face of the earth, a best-selling author, a Barbecue Hall of Famer, a Barbecue Central Show's guest Hall of Famer. We welcome back our pal, none other than Meathead from AmazingRibs.com. Meathead, we have a YouTube poll question of the week that we're asking everybody tonight, which is this: have you purchased a bottle or all of the 3 bottles of Doug Scheiding's rubs yet, yes or no? I think you're on mute, Meathead. I cannot hear you. At least the computer's up. 2 weeks ago with Doug, it completely shut down. And who knew what was going to happen at that point? Well, before we get Meathead's answer here, I will tell you that the YouTube voting public, and it's not trending in Doug's favor, unfortunately, I hate to say it, 80% of people have said no. They have not tried or purchased a bottle of Doug's rubs yet. I can only surmise that it's a short matter of time before they become purchasers.
How's this sound?
That sounds great.
Well, it's not my high-end fancy microphone. Don't know why it's not cooperating, but whatever. You can hear me and I can hear you. Hey, Greg, I'm so sorry to hear about your loss of your friend Jenny. That was a beautiful tribute you gave to her. That's too bad. Obviously, somebody very special. I have tried Doug's products, but I must confess I didn't purchase them. Doug was kind enough to send me some samples. He and I are old friends. But I think the more important quiz question is how many people have tried Meathead's rubs and sauces?
All right. So the follow-up YouTube poll question of the week that I'll track here in the instant chat is how many people have bought Meathead's rubs and sauces. So we'll track that. Meathead, do you take the membrane off of spare ribs?
Yes, I take them off of all ribs except beef ribs. You need to leave them on beef ribs, otherwise they'll fall apart.
Yeah.
I take them off not because they block smoke, not because they block flavor, but they can get very chewy or rubbery or leathery, depending on how you cook them. And I think it's a courtesy to my guests to make the food as easy to eat as possible. I went to Japan a few years ago, and they have a whole regimen of cooking called kaiseki. It's pretty much the same food you would serve on a Tuesday night, only you prepare it very carefully, very meticulously, very beautifully, because it's out of respect to your guests. And I feel that removing the membrane is kaiseki.
Why specifically a Tuesday night? Or is it because it's Tuesday night you've decided
any
to
night, any night. Tuesday, Wednesday, any night. I mean, you can have a very special guest over and serve them a meal that you would cook on any night, but you do it meticulously.
We have a topic this evening, as I was talking about in the newsletter. We're constantly gaining new audience members who have a very minuscule knowledge base to work off of, if you can believe it. They're just getting into it. Maybe they had a birthday over the summer and the wife decided to get the person a smoker, or the husband decided to get the person a smoker, whatever the case may be. So there's a lot of terms and a lot of acronyms and a lot of information that they're going to be ingesting here over the next weeks and months as they become their own backyard pitmaster. One of those hot button topics inevitably will be, if you do your, how do you do your chicken? Do you brine it? Do you brine your turkey for Thanksgiving? Brining is a big deal. So you thought it would be a good idea to refresh everybody. I also bought into that, by the way, because there are a bunch of new people always coming in. So let's talk about the topic of brining, and let's go right from a 30,000 foot level to start, and then we can kind of nail down from there. What is brining?
Well, brining is a way to add salt to food. And let's back up to even the 40,000 foot level and talk a little bit about salt. Salt is the magic rock. Salt behaves differently than any other herb and spice you have on your spice rack. Salt is just two little atoms, sodium and chloride. And when they get wet, they get electrified. It's called ionized. And they can move deep into the center of a steak or a chicken or whatever protein, even vegetables. But garlic and sugar's 23 or more atoms. They're too large to penetrate beyond the little cracks and pores in the surface. They can't get deep. And the proof is, if you don't believe me, is go get a turkey breast or a pork loin and sprinkle every darn rub and salt and combination of flavors you want on it. And if you cut it open and take a core sample, you won't taste any of it. You won't taste the garlic. You won't taste the sugar. You won't taste the black pepper. So when you take your turkey and you put it in that beer cooler and fill it with apple juice and dump a ton of black pepper and sugar and salt in there, the only thing that's getting into the turkey is the salt. All the rest of the stuff will season the surface, which is fine. But you can waste a lot less ingredients just by sprinkling your salt, your black pepper rather, and sugar and garlic and all that stuff on the surface. Now, when you dunk food into a vat of liquid, water or apple juice or something, It's called wet brining, I'm pretty sure I'm the one that coined the two terms dry brining and wet brining about 15, 20 years ago. I don't believe anybody had used those terms previously, but they're differentiated. And I got some blowback over the term dry brining because typically brining is done in a saline or salt solution.
Yeah.
And most recipes for wet brining or dunking in water have you make up a solution that's around 6%. But the ideal salt content of protein, like a chicken or a turkey, is less than 1%. 1/2 of 1% is generally the ideal amount.
Wow.
So if you're dunking it into a 6% solution, you've got to kind of guesstimate the time that you leave it in there. Otherwise, it can get too salty. And that's always a tricky line to walk. I prefer dry brining. Dry brining is just sprinkling salt on the meat. If you apply a 1/2 teaspoon of Morton's coarse kosher salt per pound of meat, that's all you need. And it comes through at about 1/2 to 3/4%, exactly the right amount. So you can't over salt it. And you don't need to have a big old vat of liquid in your fridge. So I think dry brining is a better way to go. Now, people complain that they say the salt pulls liquid out of the meat. And when they season a lot of food like a brisket or something, and they pour the rub on, they think the salt is pulling the liquid out because there's liquid in the pan. But it's not the salt. The salt does, in fact, pull a little liquid to the surface, but it's just enough to melt the salt and dissolve it, and then it sucks the salt back in. All that liquid in the bottom is being pulled to the surface by the sugar and the other ingredients in the solution. And there's another myth I want to bust right here. The way the salt gets into the meat is a process called diffusion, not osmosis. Everybody learned a little bit about osmosis in school, but osmosis is about the movement of water. Diffusion is the movement of salt. And Greg's just thrown up on the screen a graphic that's from my new book, which will be out in spring. And you can see in diffusion, the salt moves from a high concentration to a low concentration. In osmosis, the water moves from a low concentration to a high concentration. So when you sprinkle salt on meat, it's really diffusion, not osmosis. And that's a myth that just doesn't want to go away. The other thing I wanted to mention, Greg, is brinerades. And again, I think this is a term I coined. It's a marinade that has got high salt concentration. So if you're marinating, the salt will penetrate. So like, for example, if you marinate with soy sauce, which is salty, it will penetrate. The marinade will, the salt will penetrate. The rest of the flavors will remain on or near the surface. But that's a great way to do your marinades, is to make sure there's salt in them so you have a brinerade.
I've never heard of the term brinerade. So
it's
maybe
marinade with salt. I think I coined the term, Greg.
Do you trademark that?
I don't trademark. Greg, I didn't invent reverse sear, but I'm pretty sure I introduced the barbecue world to the concept, or certainly popularized it. There's so many things that I have taught and that are in my book and on the website. It's just my way. I share. I'm an educator.
There was another slide that you'd sent me about different sizes and shapes of salt or whatever. Did you want to see that?
Yeah, if you want to throw that up, please.
Sure.
This is important. A recipe that says add a 1/2 teaspoon of salt. The author is guilty of malpractice. It's a crappy recipe. And unfortunately, most recipes are written that way. They're assuming that you're using table salt, but not everybody uses table salt. In fact, kosher salts become very popular. There's a difference between table salt and kosher salt, and that's the size of the grains. And this little illustration, if you look at, say, the tennis balls and the basketballs, there's a lot more air in the basketball container than in the tennis ball container. So the size and the shape of the salt grains vastly impacts the salinity. So if you use a half a teaspoon of kosher salt, Morton's kosher salt, and by the way, I standardize on Morton's kosher salt in all my recipes. I am not paid for it. I don't know anybody at Morton's. I've never been offered any money for it. I just felt that that was a good, easy salt to find. It's easy to pick up with your fingers and sprinkle, and it's just standard in all my recipes. And I always call it out by name. I never just say plain salt. But Morton's kosher salt is a different size and shape than Diamond Crystal kosher salt. So if the recipe just says kosher salt, the question is, which one? And if you want to get the salt right, you start with a recipe that tells you which salt. The other thing is salt is really very much a personal preference. I've had people come back to me and say, hey, this recipe's got too much salt. And the next guy comes along and says, this guy hasn't got enough. So that's a very personal thing. But I try to recommend the amount that I think is appropriate.
How can Morton's, this isn't going to turn into a salt dissertation here, but I feel like I have to ask the question. I have noticed that Morton's is consistently the same box after box after box. And if I, on the off chance, have to buy a Diamond Crystal for whatever reason, whatever the hell it's called, that seems to break or become powdery at a much more rapid rate. And then at that point, I can only assume it becomes, unless you're weighing it, which of course I would always encourage people to do, weigh, and that way you know you have exact amounts. But if you're not going to weigh it, like all of a sudden, you know, a pinch of Morton's and a pinch of Diamond Crystal becomes very skewed. And they're different feeling right out of the box anyway, but then factor in the breakability or dustability of the Diamond Crystal, I find it to be an inferior product. No offense to Diamond Crystal.
Well, you hit on a really important concept, and that is weighing salt. Now, back when I started writing, nobody had thermometers, and I was out there. You can ask the friends at ThermalWorks. They once told me that AmazingRibs.com sold more thermometers than any of their in-house salesmen. We have always promoted thermometers, and we're promoting scales. A kitchen scale is really handy, especially for baking and flour and salt, because all salt have the exact same salinity if you weigh them. So an ounce of Morton's kosher and an ounce of Malden, which is very large grains, have exactly the same salinity. The weight is equal salinity. The volume by spoons or measurements are not. And you address the subject of the powdery stuff. It is a rock, and it's it's brittle, it's fragile. Have you ever noticed when you get a bag of popcorn, the whole popcorns float to the top and all the crumbs go to the bottom?
Yeah.
Same thing with salt. The bottom of the salt container often has smaller powdery granules. So it's in inexact science. And by the way, if you go easy with the salt, my recipe's a half a teaspoon per pound of meat. And here's why. Let's talk about a slab of ribs. If you put a rub on it that has salt in it, it may be just enough to make the slab of ribs good. But if you put the same rub on a pork butt, which is 4 to 5 inches thick and weighs a lot more, the salt is not going to penetrate. So I recommend always you add salt and the other seasoning separately. It's like the brake and the gas in your car. They both control your speed, but they work differently and separately. So add the salt, half a teaspoon per pound of Morton's kosher salt. And so it's by pound, whereas the garlic and all the other stuff is based on surface area, how much surface area you have. So you apply them separately, and all my recipes apply separately. All my rub recipes have no salt in them because I want you to add the salt separately.
You had mentioned a handful of minutes ago about the 1% or one half of 1%. When I look at the enhanced turkeys, let's say during Thanksgiving, it says they're in a 5 or 6 or 7% solution. To me, then that would signify they're immediately oversalted.
No, it's usually, I think, close to 8%, which is the limit. It's up to 8% liquid. The salt portion of that is much smaller. It's not 5 or 8% salt. So it's liquid, and that's liquid could have phosphates in it, which are used often by competition cooks to help retain moisture. Salt does some of that too, by the way. Salt amplifies flavor without altering it. Garlic will alter flavor. Sugar alters flavor. Black pepper alters. Salt doesn't alter it. It just amplifies it. And the other cool thing that this magic rock does is it denatures proteins, which is a fancy way of saying it alters the structure of the protein. That coiled, twisted mass, which is the most complicated molecule on Earth, it will change the shape of it, and it helps it hold on to moisture. So if you if you go easy, use my number, half a teaspoon per pound. You're not, I know your doctor told you to cut back on salt. You're not anywhere near, and I've got on the website some of the calculations as to how much salt you're actually ingesting, and you're way below the daily limit.
If you want more information, please race over to AmazingRibs.com, where you can have a whole bunch of free information. And if you really want to throw caution and $35 for a year to the wind, you join the Pitmasters Club over at AmazingRibs.com. You get a bunch of access to great videos and some camaraderie with other like-minded folks. And you put a few bucks in the kitty for Meathead to invest in that great website. Meathead, always appreciate the time, and if you can believe it, we will talk to you again in September.
Oh, my God. Where does the time fly? Greg, always fun talking to you.
Football season is upon us, Meathead.
Yes. Do
we
you have a quarterback this year?
We do. Oh. I know you do. How quick, how much the confidence changes when you have a first-round stud draft pick in the quarterback's position.
Well, he could be Joe Burrow or he could be somebody else.
Yes.
We don't know. Fingers are crossed over here. A lot of optimism in Chicago.
All right. Well, we're going to continue to be optimistic here in Cleveland, and like everything, we'll see how the season goes, but we'll keep track of it as we continue on. We'll see you in September, Meathead. It's the great Meathead from AmazingRibs.com, and we'll restart that. Robert Moss is ready to go. We'll get to him here in just 1 second. Before we do, I ask you, are you tired of settling for mediocre grilling experiences? Of course you are. Well, it's time to step your game up. Bring the ultimate flavor and cooker to the backyard barbecues. Pits and Spits Charcoal Grills, offering the highest quality live fire cooking experience you can get in the market today. Using either wood or charcoal, their solid fuel grills produce those classic flavors you're looking for when you have the time to fire up the grill and cook for family and friends. With a large adjustable fuel tray, you can raise and lower the fire to control and fine-tune the heat. Their take on the very popular Santa Maria-style grill. Check them out online, pitsandspits.com/BBQ Central. That's pitsandspits.com/BBQ Central, all spelled out. Use promo code Charcoal Central, all one word as well, Charcoal Central, for $150 off any charcoal grill. Pitsandspits.com, and that's the double T on the pits and the spits.com/BBQ Central, and promo code Charcoal Central for $150 off at checkout. We're back with Robert Moss right after this. Stick around. Be right back.
You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Howard Stern, Jim Rome, Dan Patrick, and Greg Rempe. The Mountain Rushmore of talk show entertainment. Now, let's get back to the Barbecue Central Show.
And we thank Meathead for joining us last segment. This portion of the show being brought to you by the Fireboard 2, Fireboard 2 Drive, Fireboard Spark, and the all-new Fireboard Pulse. If you have Alexa or the Google Assistant in your home, you're in luck. The Fireboard 2 and Drive, fully integrated with all of these smart speakers. You find out more by visiting fireboard.com or you call them with your questions, 816-945-2232. My next guest tonight is the contributing barbecue editor for Southern Living Magazine, a 2023 Barbecue Central Show's guest Hall of Famer, our monthly pal, Robert Moss. Robert, appreciate you joining me here this evening as you have each and every month for now a handful of years. We have a YouTube poll question of the week that we're asking everybody, and eventually it will go into two questions here. But one right off the bat, have you purchased a bottle of Doug Scheiding's rubs yet?
No, I have not.
84% of the people, by the way, have not purchased Doug's rubs.
But I have to explain. I would ordinarily do it. I am on a rub moratorium that was mandated after the pandemic, when apparently everybody and their uncle started selling rubs in 2020 or 2021, and I kept getting boxes shipped to my doorstep, and I had it once the entire shelf of my pantry was filled with bottles of barbecue rub. My wife is like, no more rub. They cannot go in there. So once we get through all that rub, which could be several decades from now, I'll look at Doug's.
Take it from me, they're good. I didn't pay for them, but they're definitely good. Actually, I did buy a bottle of his rub because the one that the girls seemed to like the most, I unknowingly used it up. Thought I had more of it, but it was the other bottle that I had more of, so I had to become then a paying member.
I'm from South Carolina. Our definition of rub is salt. And in my case, Morton's kosher salt, and I've always got a box of that, and maybe some black pepper, and that's about as crazy as we get down here. So we don't go through a lot of rub in our household, at least.
Have you ever used that diamond crystal?
I have. I'm actually I'm on board with everything Meathead said. Weigh it. I've gotten so used to using Morton salt, I don't measure anything. I just grab a pinch and sort of know how much it is. And they were out of Morton's one time. I went to the grocery store, so I got Diamond Crystals. It's completely different. It's much finer grain. The same sort of, like, if you're just doing it by feel, you salt with it, it's totally different. It's actually much more salty because I think there's just a finer grain, a lot more salinity for the same pinch size. And so, I've used them both. And if you're not familiar with the salt, definitely weigh it, because each salt behaves very differently.
I had Aaron Franklin on the show a couple weeks ago. We were talking about, we had an unplanned rib class, I guess. And I was telling him how I had just gotten done a week or two before that doing what ended up being an 8-rack spare rib cook for what was a surprise birthday party for me. And I was looking at it during the prep phase, and I was going, am I really going to pull 8 membranes off the back of these spare ribs? Now, baby back ribs, very easy to do. I have a whole process down where you worm your finger through the middle of the rack, and then you can just pull up and they all come out very nice and easy. Not so easy with the spare ribs. So long way to go to say, are you a membrane jerker when it comes to spare ribs?
Usually, though, I'm not passionate about it one way or another. I'm with you. I usually do spares and grab a paper towel and start to, and sometimes it comes right off, and sometimes I'm jerking at it and thinking, why am I doing this? I don't mind it if the ribs have a little membrane on the bottom once they're cooked. It's just something you pull off. But typically, yes, I will try to pull them off unless I'm just feeling impatient, or it's a particularly hard rack to get the membrane off of.
Tonight's topic, and we've had now going on 8 months of great educational topics that I'm getting a lot of feedback on, so we'll keep the train going here. I want to talk about tracing the influences and adaptations of Southern barbecue, but this time outside of the region. So maybe we can explore how Southern barbecue traditions have migrated and interacted with other culinary cultures, both here within the States, and how they might also infect the rest of the world.
Yeah. And that got me thinking as I was sort of prepping about, because we have talked in the past about how the barbecue sort of, developed in the South and spread westward all the way to California as early as the gold rush days in the 19th century. But it's sort of interesting. There's this sort of cycle that parts of the country discover Southern barbecue at different times over the years, or it moves outward for various reasons. So one of the ones we talked about was the westward migration, which a lot of Southerners headed to Texas, headed to California, and took barbecue with them. But from the earliest days, like the colonial, really right after the Revolution, what you may call the early Republic years, a lot of commentators would visit the early United States from England and Europe and other places. And some of our best descriptions of early barbecues come from their travel writings, because somebody who lives in the United States doesn't really want to spend a lot of time describing a barbecue, because everybody goes to them. They know what they're like. It's more something that a visitor will describe. So you see a lot of great descriptions in the 1780s, 1790s, early easing into the 19th century of this unique thing called the American barbecue. And American barbecue at the time was very different. People have been roasting animals over fire forever, and every culture has some form of grilled or roasted meat. But the whole animal cooked like over the coals in a hole in the ground, basted with the vinegar, pepper, salt, lard or butter sauce. That was something unique to the United States, the early United States, and was picked up on. I don't know though that people would come visit and comment on it in their writing, but I don't know if they would take it back to England or wherever and try to stage an American barbecue. I haven't found a whole lot of instances of that in the studies. But of course, the American barbecue tradition got bigger and bigger and bigger all the way through to the 19th century, and it was very much a Southern tradition, somewhat of a Western tradition in there. But in the 1890s, there was this period where all of a sudden the Southern barbecue was discovered by the national press, if you will, which is headquartered in New York, but also in all the other major cities in the Northeast. But there was a big exposition, the Atlanta Cotton, I think it's called the Atlanta Cotton States and International Exposition, I think, in 1895, held in Atlanta. It was one of these big sort of World Fair kind of things, and it brought lots and lots of visitors to Atlanta. And this was an interesting time in American history, because it was when the South and North were sort of reuniting after the 30 years since the Civil War, and there's a lot of interest in the South from Northern readers. So lots and lots of journalists came south on the train from New York and elsewhere, and wrote up this big Cotton State Exposition, which featured a giant barbecue concession from John Wilkes, or actually John Calloway, who was the barbecuing sheriff of Wilkes County, Georgia. And he had these like giant pits and roasting pigs and shoats and all that kind of thing. And so there was a little flurry of newspaper stories. And this was also in the time when the early days of things like the Associated Press and the other wire or newspaper syndicates. So one story might be written and then sent out via telegram to all the newspapers all across the country. So you saw all these newspaper articles just all over the place describing these Georgia barbecues. And for a long time, for several decades, Georgia was sort of considered to be the home of Southern barbecue. Again, I don't know that made a lot of impact on the North and other parts of the country adopting American barbecue, but they certainly knew what barbecue was and they learned about it, and it became sort of a fashionable or thing people were interested in. In terms of eating barbecue, that's people coming from outside to the South and then taking the experience with them. In the early 20th century, that's when you saw a lot of people taking barbecue from the South elsewhere. So you had the first Great Migration right around the time of World War I, which was in the Jim Crow era. Lots of African American Southerners decided, we can't stay here any longer. We're going to move elsewhere to the northern cities, where there's jobs, where we'll be treated better, and that was the first wave. And there's a second Great Migration that happened after the Second World War. But during the first Great Migration, it's sort of interesting how individual states would you sort of go where you know people. So like South Carolinians tend to go to New York, whereas people in Mississippi tended to go to Chicago. And so you had sort of a regional type of thing. But one of the people who went who left the South during the first Great Migration was a guy named Henry Perry, who was born just outside of Memphis, Tennessee, and headed to Kansas City in the early 19th century. I think he arrived somewhere around 1907, set up a barbecue stand in an alley, cooking sort of Memphis-style barbecue, and then taught a whole generation, including a guy named Charlie Bryant, who had a brother named Arthur Bryant, who ended up opening a restaurant called Arthur Bryant's, which is still there today. He also taught a guy named Arthur Pinkard, who went and worked for George and Arzelia Gates, who opened Gates Barbecue, which is still there today. And so you can sort of trace that lineage straight back to Memphis. Same thing with Chicago after the Second World War, the Second Great Migration, another great outflux from the South. Lots of barbecue folks headed to different parts. So people with barbecue traditions headed from the South to different parts. People in Mississippi tended to go to Chicago because they had connections there, and so you would go to Chicago. And a little town called Indianola, Mississippi, sent several different families left there, headed to Chicago, and ended up opening very famous barbecue joints. The Lemons family from Indianola ended up settling on the south side of Chicago and opened Lem's Barbecue, which is still there today, and one of these classic aquarium smoker barbecues. The Collins brothers, one of whom was named Argia B, headed up as well, or just after World War II, 1940s, 1950s. Argia B's was opened up. Leon Finney opened Leon's. So the whole South Side barbecue tradition can really be traced back to the South, and that period is, the outward migration of the South took barbecue to northern cities, where initially it was meant to, it was serving other folks from the area who like barbecue, other Mississippi transplants. But then eventually, over time, everybody in Chicago, in the South Side of Chicago at least, fell in love with those kind of ribs and rib tips, and a whole style was born through that migration.
I'm fascinated that Mississippi winds up getting to Chicago. You mentioned that they have connections up there, but I don't know what that means. Does that mean that at one point somebody that everybody knew landed in Chicago and was either writing or calling, Chicago's badass,
absolutely.
Everybody's got to come up?
Yep. And this is not unique to the Great Migration. You see it with migration patterns all over America and all over the world. I mean, why would you up and move to Los Angeles or Texas? Well, it's because a cousin who got a job up there and said, I can get you a job at the factory. So, you would get on the train and go up. And so it's very much, this sort of series of connections of family relationships. And that's why if you were in Indianola, Mississippi, you wouldn't think to get on a train and go to New York where you knew no one. You could get on a train and go to Chicago where you knew a cousin and had a friend. They could have a place to stay while you got your feet under you, and it could get you a job somewhere. And a lot of this was about moving from the rural agricultural South to places where there were jobs, lots of post-war factory jobs, and knowing somebody who could get you in the door was a big draw.
In the beginning of all this, you had mentioned that through different times is when different areas would be introduced and take to Southern barbecue. Were there times when, let's say, I'm just throwing out a location, let's say, Mississippi was introduced to it, or let's say Indiana was introduced to it, and then you could read about it or find something, and then all of a sudden it disappears, and then there's a reintroduction, and then it disappears again, or once it shows up somewhere, it sticks?
No, and did you mention Indiana on purpose, or
no? It's one of my favorite states, of course.
I know you love Indiana.
Yeah.
That's actually in my little. I've not written it yet, but someday I'm going to write the unexpurgated history of barbecue in Indiana. But Indiana actually has a very interesting barbecue history. It's not tied to the Great Migration. So it wasn't a migration of African Americans, but it was more of white Southerners moving into Indiana. And Southern Indiana is a very much, very Southern state in a lot of ways. But in the early 20th century, there was a flourishing barbecue scene in Evansville, Indiana. In fact, if you go back to the papers in the 1920s and 1930s, Evansville tried to claim itself the barbecue capital of America. Actually, they said the commercial barbecue capital of America, because there was a guy named Floyd Ball, or Baugh, or Bow. I'm not sure how you would say it. If you look online, you can find pictures of Ball's Barbecue in Evansville. And he moved up there and opened up a Kentucky or Southern style barbecue joint in Evansville. And I can't quite trace the lineage, but he sold his operation at some point to a guy named Mac McKinney, who opened Mac's Barbecue in Evansville, Indiana, which, if you read Barbecue, the History of American Institution, my history, I talk a good bit about Mac's, because somebody who worked at Mac's was Dave Thomas of Wendy's fame. Wow. Who actually opened up a franchise version of Mac's Barbecue that did not do so well. And he franchised and licensed the concept from Mac McKinney going back to Bow's. So there's this whole flourishing of barbecue in that part of Indiana. Just to close the loop on Dave decided barbecue was a losing product and it was too expensive, and so he switched to burgers and founded Wendy's. And I think the rest is history.
Yeah, hard to argue with that.
But it's all tied back. Yeah, I think he did okay for himself. But Balls, and there was this whole little flourishing of barbecue in Indiana in the 40s and 50s. And just maybe Dave Thomas put him out of business, but it disappeared by the 60s and 70s. No one was talking about Indiana barbecue anymore. But there was a little flourishing of barbecue that did not persist in the southern part of Indiana.
Before we go, we all love lists. And you have a new list coming out here in September. What can you scoop us with tonight?
Yeah, so this year, for Southern Living, we did the top 50 2 years in a row. Last year and the year before, we sort of took some off for the pandemic, but we took a look at it and said, okay, we're not going to do another top 50 for 2024. It's not been enough time. There's not been enough change. It'd be largely the same list. Mm-hmm. Though actually, there's been some interesting movement on that list that we'll talk about in a future date. What we decided to do instead was just do the new barbecue joints, which let me actually focus on not having to go revisit a bunch of places I've been before, but a bunch of new places. So we're doing the top new barbecue joints in the South, coming out in the print edition of Southern Living in September, which means it'll be on the newsstand soon. They come out a little bit before September. I don't know exactly when the digital version will drop. I think there'll be 16 restaurants in the print edition, which has limited space, and then an extra 22, 24 in the digital version that will come online, sort of ranking. And there's a lot of really interesting new stuff going on in the barbecue scene. So I had fun not only doing the trips and visiting all these newer places. And new, we defined it as, we did a best new barbecue joints, I think, back in 2022. So, or into 21. So it's basically the last 2 or 3 years. But in the barbecue world, there's surprisingly not that many new places are opening up constantly that are really, really noteworthy. So rounding up 2 or 3 years worth of new barbecue openings. And for this list, it's not a second location of an established restaurant. It has to be a new concept, a new restaurant. So that's coming out in a couple of weeks. It may be hitting the newsstands probably in a week or two. So keep an eye out for that. I had a lot of fun doing it.
All right. So when we rejoin our company here in September, maybe we could take a hack at a good portion of those and get your take.
Yeah, list will be out. I'd be glad to talk about it and,
all right.
and talk about some of the trends and things that we're seeing. The one trend I'll preview is that variety seems to be the theme. There's lots and lots of different styles and different barbecue joints out there. So it makes me really optimistic about the future and where barbecue's heading, because there's always something new and interesting to find out there.
The tease is good, so we will wait for September and dig into it a little bit more, and then a new topic. Of course, robertfmoss.com is the website. Robert, always appreciate the time and the insight, and we'll see you in September.
All right, sounds good.
Robert Moss right there, of course, and doing an incredible job as always. Bill in the chat room. Robert is a great guest. He brings more than information. He's a teacher, and his style and command of history makes him a favorite around here. Absolutely. Look here. Bobby Rempe is watching the show. So I have that shirt. I know. I bought that shirt. Whoa. I probably didn't mean to push that a second time, but you're welcome. Thank you for watching, or thank you for just jumping in for 1 second and noticing the shirt. All right, we're not over yet, but we will be in about 8 seconds. We'll do this piece of business, and then we'll get to the second hour here. Give you a YouTube update on the poll side. Hey, Maddie's in here too. Hey. Hey-o. What do we love about ceramic cookers? We love that they're fuel efficient. We love that you can achieve low and slow temperatures for traditional barbecue meats. We love that you can get rip-roaring hot for the high-temperature grilling of steaks and other thin cuts. But what's missing in the everyday lineup of ceramic cookers? The real ability to do true two-zone cooking. Two-zone cooking is very important to both professional and backyard cooks. It's the best way to manage a fire and cook with confidence. However, getting a two-zone fire in a round ceramic cooker isn't very realistic. Why? Because it's round. Enter Primo Grill and their game-changing oval design. This shape gives you the ability to execute that two-zone setup that you desire. It also gives you the other ceramic grill benefits as well. When you break it down, there's more than 60 different ways to configure the Primo cooker, so you're only limited by your imagination. They have all the accessories that you want nowadays. They have the revamped lift hinge, top and bottom dampers with numbering, a Primo grill rotisserie accessory, the pizza grill accessory, all the accessories that you want. Really complete the Primo experience. It gives you the Primo experience. Only sold through dealers. Find one near you by visiting the website, primogrill.com. Also, follow them on Facebook and Instagram. Also, follow me socially, and I'm always resharing the sponsors of the show and their reels and posts through Instagram. So if you're not following them, make sure you follow me, and then follow them after you see them on my feed. Synergistic, primogrill.com. And we're back to wrap the first hour right after this. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Continuing to produce incredibly mediocre content in an exceptionally professional way. You're listening and watching the Barbecue Central Show. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
All right, welcome back. This portion of the show is brought to you by me, Maddie Rempe, weighing in. I'm watching from your mom and dad's house in Florida. Maddie, you're in Florida? When did you go there? This would certainly help answer the question, where have you been since Saturday? Maybe next time, let me know. All right. In any event, I now know where Maddie is. Watching the show from my parents' house. What did I do with that? No? Well, I don't have it anymore. I do have it. Watching from my parents' house. You remember them, Bill and Connie right there looking as spry as ever. My dad with his sweet watch and forearm tat that he got in the Navy. And, of course, my mom getting ready to smack him like she used to do in the old days. All the times. Mom beating up dad. Happens frequently. All right, we are pointing to the second hour. You refresh your libations, and we'll be back right after this. You're listening and watching the Barbecue Central show right here on the Barbecue Central Network. Stick around, be right back.
Hello, this is Jenny Bell from Clarington, Ohio, and I'm listening to Barbecue Central.
Happy to have you aboard here for the really big barbecue show.
We cook because we have to, and we grill because we want to.
Hit me!
Fine, how's it going?
You have a great show. I'm a big fan.
Boing.
So what seems to be the problem here? This man looks like he's dead, and he's in the crackle. Charbono! It's all about the charbono, dude.
Succulent fish. What?
He ate 2 feet for wieners.
Now listen, Lavernius, shut your face.
I'm shaking like a dog shit peach seeds.
We have top men working on it right now. Top men.
And just like that, we are into the second hour. Barbecue Central shows right here, taking you all the way until 11 o'clock Eastern, or maybe even a little over if you're lucky. We cover all the most important items in the live fire world today. Also, later in the week. Possibly the next week and later in the month. Still to come on the show this evening, David Gafford from the Barbecue Lab makes his debut on this show. And second-time guest and fellow Clevelander Darren Carter from Carter's Barbecue will join us to close out the show. Barbecue Central show is coming to you live and direct from
Palm City, USA, Cleveland.
Of course, we say good evening to those of you watching tonight through one of our video streaming platform partners. You can go to facebook.com/BBQ Central Show to watch, or the twitter.com/BBQ Central Show to watch, or you can watch on YouTube, which is youtube.com/@BBQ Central Show, where we have a new YouTube poll question of the week that we're asking everybody. Have you bought any of Doug Scheiding's rubs yet? And 84% of you are saying no. In the grand scheme of things, maybe Doug's a little put off, but 16% have bought your rubs, Doug. That's 16% more folks than maybe haven't, or because you show up on this show regularly, 16% of people want to support you. And don't look at it as 84% of people not wanting to support you. I wouldn't do that. I would say, no. There's a solid almost 20% of the YouTube voting public that supports me by buying at least one bottle of my rub. I would say look at it that way and keep that chin up, kid up. Coming up on the best moments of the Barbecue Central show in 10 minutes or less this coming Friday, episode 346, bringing you back to August 16th of 2011, featuring interview with the creator of the Butcher Barbecue line of rubs and sauces and injections and marinades, our pal Dave Bosca. At this point in time, I had Dave on to talk about an event he took part in along with 9 other of the best barbecue competition teams at the time that was benefiting a family in need in the Kansas City, Missouri area. They were also on Extreme Home Makeover, if you remember that show, very popular back in 2011. Dave was talking about how much money they had raised, what work they were doing for the event. So 2 things here. I don't recall this ever happening, and I'm sure this was some kind of majorly promoted event, both from a KCBS side of things and a hey, barbecues on television side of things, especially on this big hit show, Extreme Home Makeover. So I don't even recall that happening. Not a surprise, right? Because I don't recall a lot of major things happening. The more I find out about what John is digging up here in the Barbecue Central show's archives. So I do thank John for finding it and bringing it back to the forefront. Second, to a degree, I think this speaks volumes to where the state of the Kansas City Barbecue Society is right now, which is obviously nowhere. It's not on any radar. It's not being leveraged for popularity like it had in years past. It's a literal nothing as it sits here in 2024. especially when you compare it to 2011 or 2010 or 2009. No buzz. There's no one outside of the organization talking about it. There is zero happening, which is not good, which is not the way I was hoping it was going to go. But it doesn't look great. However, a great segment with our pal Dave Bosca, so you want to look for that on Friday. You need to subscribe to the podcast feed in order to hear the best of shows. You can do that by visiting the website, thebbqcentralshow.com/subscribe. Don't forget, if you want to hear a guest or segment again that you feel has been lost in the archives, email John and let him know what you would like to hear. That's JON at thebbqcentralshow.com. Diane Me is asking, what is Doug's favorite or best rub? I don't see Doug in the chat room here, Diane, but for me, it's the all-purpose rub for me. I love it. Haven't tried the brisket one yet. That's a little specialized, and we don't cook a lot of briskets in this house. I've also used the Doug's Finishing Dust, I believe it's called. That was good in an emergency replacement of Sterling Big Papa Ball's Happy Ending finishing rub that I usually use on my racks of ribs and pulled pork. So I would say the all-purpose number 1, Doug's Dust number 2, and then brisket rub to be determined. The Famous Dave's All-Star Barbecue Series rolled into where? Minnetonka, Minnesota this past weekend, if you can believe it. Winning the whole thing, the Great Pig in the Sky Barbecue, taking reserve Big Racks Barbecue. Both the grand champion and reserve grand champion for this event have earned spots in the 2024 World Food Championships in the barbecue division that takes place in November in the great city of Indianapolis, Indiana. The next Famous Dave's All-Star Barbecue Series event is this coming Saturday, August 17th in Sioux City, Iowa. By the way, as it shows on the website, still 2 spots open. So if you've been looking to try your hand at this Famous Dave's All-Star Barbecue Series, there are currently 2 spots open in Sioux City, Iowa this coming Saturday. And then there's one more left before the series closes up shop for 2024. That will be held in Columbia, Maryland, and still 1 spot showing open for that August 24th event as well. You can find out past results as well as check out the remaining schedule of future events, which is only this coming weekend and the following weekend by visiting worldfoodchampionships.com/allstars. And before we get to Dave from the Barbecue Lab, I want to show you a picture that I have here. Coming in for only mere hours, a quick overnight because he was on a motorcycle tour of this part of the country. Somebody that you wouldn't know if you saw him, but here they are. Of course, that's me on the right. But on the left, now, as my youngest daughter said, this guy looked so much like Pops, I couldn't believe it, which is my dad. I said, yeah, look like Pops, talks like Pop's brother, Uncle Tom, or has the same kind of voice and cadence. This, folks, if you can believe it, and there was a whole other agenda that I had planned with this guy, but time was not on my side for a number of reasons. But this guy on the left is the one and only guy you have heard me say, the person responsible for getting me into this in the first place, my cousin Glenn Rempe, right there with the Fuel and Fuddle t-shirt. On a motorcycle tour, was coming through Cleveland via Elmira, New York, which makes wild sense. Of course, you're passing through Cleveland. And he was able to stop in for a quick dinner on Sunday night, overnighted, and then I think it's like the first time he's been into Cleveland. He was in Columbus a lot for work, but I don't think he's been up to Cleveland, not in any recent time, for sure, maybe if ever. And what do I never do? Go to the Rock Hall. Glenn was in town for 18 seconds, and he went to the Rock Hall. Good for you, Glenn. Has his visit inspired me to change my ways? No. Of course not. He didn't call me and go, it's life-changing shit. So until somebody calls and tells me that, which nobody has, and usually it's like, how's the rock call? That's not inspiring to me, even though it's 10 minutes from my house. And it's been there for however long it's been erected. I don't know. 8 years, 28 years. Never been, and probably won't ever go, because it's, I got to have better than that. I demand excellence, for crying out loud. All right, David Gafford is ready to go from the Barbecue Lab. Before we get to him, I'll talk to you quickly about Franklin Barbecue Pits. What you have with the Franklin Pit is a deeply thought out and refined version of the old propane-style cookers that Aaron built for Franklin Barbecue. Stylistically, it reflects the kind of bare-bones industrial handmade aesthetic that he loves, as in the patina and the way the build allows you to see the welds and the craftsmanship. The Franklin Pit is primarily made of quarter-inch thick American-made steel. That, in a word, is strong. Anything that sees heat is engineered to be incredibly solid and should last a century or more, 100 years or more, if cared for properly. The thickness of that steel guarantees professional-grade heat retention, which is a critical component to making great barbecue. Every Franklin Pit unique unto itself, to include their own natural markings and its own badged number. Franklin Pits can be found at fine barbecue specialty stores in select regions of the country. If you, the listener, are an owner of such a store and you wish to become a certified Franklin dealer, please visit franklinbbqpits.com and fill out a dealer form. Or if you're a listener of the show and you want to own a Franklin Pit, but you don't live close to a certified dealer, you can also visit franklinbbqpits.com and purchase a pit. Franklin Pits will ship a Franklin Pit right to your driveway. So either way, you own a store, you want to become a dealer, or you're not near a store and you want to become an owner of a pit, you go to the same website and accomplish whichever task you're looking for. franklinbbqpits.com. The Barbecue Lab is next. Stick around. Be right back.
You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Howard Stern, Jim Rome, Dan Patrick, and Greg Rempe. The Mountain Rushmore of talk show entertainment. Now, let's get back to the Barbecue Central Show.
All right, welcome back. This portion of the show being brought to you by Pit Barrel Cooker, the most unbelievable outdoor cooker on the planet. Doesn't matter if you're a beginner or a professional. It's a cooker you want to add to the arsenal regardless. Visit pitbarrelcooker.com and tell them the Barbecue Central Show sent you. My guest in the second hour tonight, some of the most comprehensive barbecue and grilling reviews that can be found across the interwebs. If you are more interested in cooking techniques, he has those too. Tonight he makes his debut right here on the Barbecue Central Show, and we'll learn how this whole thing got started and where he hopes to take it over the next few years. We welcome in the creator of the Barbecue Lab, David Gafford, joining me here on the show. Hey, Dave. Appreciate you joining me here. And we have a YouTube poll question of the week that we're asking everybody before we learn all about the Barbecue Lab, which is this. Have you purchased a bottle of Doug Scheiding Rogue Cookers barbecue rub yet? Yes or no?
No, not yet. But now I know what to look out for.
82% of the YouTube voting public and David are saying no, they have not ordered a bottle of Doug's rubs yet, but we'll see how that tracks through the rest of the evening here. Before we launch into the lab stuff, David, a little personal and professional background on you.
Yeah, I started out the first 15 years of my career, and I was a church music director. I play like 6 instruments. I've got multiple vocal degrees, so I'm a musician. And so I'm a musician who used to lead giant teams of people. I'd have 150 or more volunteers, and we would get together, multiple times a year. And we would get together almost always at our house. And whenever we would get together with their families, it'd be lots of people. and I was cooking on a 3-burner charbroil grill, and it would take me 4 hours to get burgers and dogs done for that many people. So that's kind of what launched us into this. Was we started out really small and undersized, but it grew into something fun.
You didn't know this was going to happen because I didn't know you were a church singer. Acapella Ave Maria. David, the floor is yours.
Ave Maria. Oh man, let's see. I know what Ave Maria, that part of this. Let's see. I've been retired for a few years. Let's see if I can break this out. Ave Maria.
Yeah! Look at this guy. Right on. You know how many people would tell me to go piss up a rope, asking them to sing on cue like that? Good for you. All right, so live fire exposure, you're cooking on that that charbroil 3-burner gas grill, and you realize not really efficient. But how does one bridge that experience into, I guess, what would eventually become the barbecue lab?
You know, I didn't grow up in a traditional barbecue family. I grew up in a family that we had, 10 or 12 different meals that mom would make, and then we would generally let her make those. We didn't really participate much, but dad would grill occasionally on the gas grill. But I grew up loving places like Famous Dave's, eating out with barbecue, and I wanted to learn how to make that myself. And learning how to make that myself was a lot of trial and error. Now, the first couple pits that we bought, they were not great. And you could call it user error. You could call it the learning curve. But those first few pits that we bought, we did not make great barbecue. And I really felt like there needed to be someone who was reviewing barbecue gear who could kind of give me a better idea of how I could use this thing and how I could work this thing to be able to get what I really wanted to get out of this pit, which was great ribs, great brisket, great pork butts. And it just wasn't happening for me. And so my wife looked at me and said, you know what? You're a nerd. Maybe you should do it. And that's kind of how we started.
What year was that?
That was back in 2018.
So in 2018, YouTube is around. I think Malcolm Reed is still probably the biggest name current day, but even back then, he was probably even more prolific than he is now because there's a lot of Me Too's out there. Was there a dearth of knowledge that you were looking for specifically, or was it just not being done in a style that you could relate to? And so your wife, using those encouraging phrases like "you're a nerd," inspire you to develop the barbecue lab on your own?
I mean, like most of the YouTube watching public, I've watched so many Malcolm Reed videos. And I watched a lot of those videos recognizing that I didn't have access to the same gear that he had access to. He'd have 6 to 8 cookers back on the back patio, a lot of different offsets that were, $3,000 to $7,000 offsets. And he'd have the charcoal barrel smokers that I didn't have anything like that. And I was just trying to figure out on my little box master built gas, propane, and charcoal vertical smoker, how can I make the same recipes he was? And what I found out is that no one's really cooking on that on YouTube. And I wasn't learning a lot of how to do that. And so I needed to vary up my game a little bit. But what I wanted to do was make grilling accessible to people that only knew the gas grill, the charbroil 3-burner like I grew up on. I wanted to actually expand my knowledge and bring people along for the ride. And the barbecue lab has just kind of grown out of that experience.
So was it cooking techniques, recipes, things like this first, and then the reviews subsequently came?
It really started out with the reviews first because I really wanted to try a lot of different grills. And so here was our strategy when we first started. I went onto Facebook Marketplace and I looked at any grill I could find that was a current iteration of a model being offered by a manufacturer. If I could get that thing for half price, I would bring it in and it'd be used, but I mean, all grills are used by the time we're done reviewing them.
Yeah.
So I would review the grill and I would turn back on Marketplace and I would sell that thing for the exact same price at a net zero cost for us. And then I'd have a review. And so I did that for the first, I'll be at least 8 or 10 grills that I did on the channel, or smokers, all through Facebook Marketplace, finding ones that were gently used and put those reviews together and put them on the channel. But that was what came first.
So as the YouTube channel starts to roll out, you're getting these grills in, you're doing your reviews, and building content? How is it being consumed by subscribers? Is it a pretty quick grab and you're multiplying quickly, or is it a bit more of a slow burn?
I mean, it grew slowly for the first few years, but what I would find is that there was a lot of great conversation that really happened around each of these cookers. It would be, I either have this cooker and here's the problems I'm having with it, or I've always wanted to buy this cooker and here's the things that I have a question about before I pull the trigger. And that really helped shape who we became, because it started that conversation around each of those pits. And I had some experience with it. Granted, I only owned it for, 2 or 3 weeks. Buy it, review it, turn it around, sell it again. But I still had more experience than most people who'd never laid hands on it. And I was able to give them some insight and then turn them into buyers. And that's where we kind of went, all right, well, this is maybe where we could go with this thing. And that became kind of Barbecue Lab 1.0.
So once you realize 1.0 is in your midst, to you and your wife, who's also a part of this team, I would say probably pretty crucial part from what I could see when we were doing sound check. Do you guys put together a set of testing standards to test products against to get results, or do you learn as you go?
Well, we started learning as we went, but the more that we've been doing it, we really have quite complex background things that we do before we do any review. Now we use a program called Millinote, which is kind of like Evernote for creatives, and we have massive spreadsheets and data points on anything that we review. And we usually script out almost everything that we're ever going to talk about on a grill before we even shoot, so we know where we're going to go, because there's so many things to cover. Every video that we make could easily be 45 to 60 minutes long, just talking about one single cooker. And that's just not practical. I can't edit that long. I can't put together videos that are that engaging for 60 whole minutes. So we try to really get it down to the meat and potatoes of what it is that people want to know. And inevitably, people let us know in the comments, hey, you forgot to test this and you forgot to give this stat. And well, that's why we have a website too. And our website will cover a lot more things that we can put in print that we couldn't cover on the video side.
The biggest issue anyone is going to face doing what you do is is proving that you are doing an unbiased review. As a consumer of products myself, I find it difficult to suss through the bullshit and find someone giving their honest take on something. So how do you achieve this level of trust with your audience?
That's been really important for us from the beginning, and to the point where for the first, I don't even know, 30 reviews that we did, I don't think we had any way to monetize or make money from any of the reviews that we shot. It was just saying, we want to help people in the barbecue space find the right grill for them, and let's see if this is something we can make a go of. But now the rules are pretty simple for us. I mean, when we do these giant head-to-heads, like we did a head-to-head of 8 different flat-top griddles, and of that there were 8 different brands and 8 different cookers, and the rules to all of the brands are the same thing. You are welcome to send us a demo unit, a sample unit for us to test in this. You can't buy your way in. You can't tell us what to say. And at the end of it, we're going to do our best to be able to show the right kind of people for your grill why this is a good one for them. But there's no holds barred on this one. So that's really the way that it works, especially with that head-to-head content that we do. And those videos take forever to put together. But
like how long?
They're always well received. I'd say that the griddle video took us 3.5 weeks.
Wow.
So you're talking about testing 8 different griddles with, I think we did something like 20 to 24 tests on each one, including thermometer tests and air temp tests and surface temperature tests and cooking tests, wind tests, you name it. But in all of that, it just takes an incredible amount of time to be able to put all that together. And we love to do it, but at the same time, it's always handy whenever you have a big family group around that you can feed. And that's what we've been doing is people always want to know, what happens to the food? Where's all the food go that you eat? Well, we don't eat it all. We have a lot of neighbors and friends around here that we feed, and we'll fill their freezers and we'll fill their fridges. And it's become something that's a lot of fun for us to be able to call up someone and say, hey, I happen to have 48 pancakes that are ready for the freezer. Who likes toaster pancakes? And we'll just drive around town and drop them off.
So my thought is, what are you doing with 8 or 10 griddles? I mean, I get the food, right? Every barbecue guy and gal is suffering from that at some point, especially if you're doing a halfway decent cook. I mean, that is a lot of real estate to take up in anybody's backyard, whether you got a third of an acre or 3 acres or whatever. So what do you do after the fact?
Yeah, we live on a third of an acre in a subdivision in the the suburbs, but our HOA has thoughts about how many grills and griddles and things we have on our property,
I bet.
and they've been relatively nice about it. But we have multiple storage units and warehouses where we keep everything because it just takes so much time just to assemble each unit.
Mm.
If you take 2 to 3 hours to assemble any one grill or griddle that comes in, and we'll review between 70 and 80 appliances per year. And you start doing the math on that, and you say, all right, at 3 hours, that's 240 hours. And you start looking and saying, well, that's going to be 5 to 6 weeks of time just assembling grills and griddles. Once I've built it, I don't want to build it again. So I'll pay a storage place to keep it, and that's definitely worth my time and money. So we try to keep any current version of units around so we have them for future comparisons.
Are you at a point in the life genesis of the channel where manufacturers are just contacting you and saying, hey, we want to send it? You're not out buying grills anymore, whether it be on Facebook Marketplace or brand new out of a big box store somewhere?
Yeah, we have people that we can talk with at almost every major barbecue brand that I'm aware of, but there are still a few holdouts. I mean, there are still a few that they don't want to be compared, or they don't like the way that we do it or something, but there are still a couple that are crickets, and people let us know in the comments, like, how come you haven't covered blank? And I'm just going, well, they won't pick up the phone, and I mean, that's why.
Who's the biggest one that's holding out that shouldn't be holding out? They would benefit the most.
Probably RecTech. I can't get anybody to pick up the phone at RecTech.
Really?
They won't. Oh yeah. I don't know why.
That's bizarre. I thought they would have been the first ones to donate in. They seem to be, I wouldn't say they're on the cutting edge, but as far as promotion is concerned, I don't want to get into a left-hand turn here, but there's a very weird thing going on in Utah recently. I don't know if you've been keeping tabs on it or not, but as you start to really dig into it, you have Blackstone is in Utah, Traeger is in Utah, and RecTech moved from Georgia, wherever the hell they were, to Utah, and Gosney is in Utah. Slowly and secretly, maybe not so secretly now since I have my finger on the pulse here, there's a lot of big live fire brands that are basing in Utah. I don't know if you've seen the same thing, and I don't know if you have any thought on why that even might be.
Well, we were just up in Utah together about a month ago, right? And by being up there, it's gorgeous land, gorgeous area. Love the mountains, love the scenery. I don't think I'm ready to see it in the winter yet. I'm still a little too Midwestern for that. I'm not sure that I'm ready for the temperatures. But I've seen the same thing. I mean, I looked up there and I thought, man, there's so many brands concentrated in one area. Why? I'm not sure. I'd have to get into the nitty gritty and look at the tax implications and the reasons why they might want to move their companies up there. But you're right. There is an inordinate amount of them up there in Utah these days.
What happens when a company sends you a product and, in your estimation, ends up shitting the bed? How do you handle it?
A lot of times I'll call them and say, look, guys, you don't want me to film this one. And since you don't want me to film this one, let's not do it, because let's just be honest. I don't have great things to say, so we're not going to do it. But it's one of those kind of things where I can also say, look, I can cover this, but I have some things that aren't great to say about it. And if you're okay with that, then I'll go ahead and publish it. But if you're not, let's just say I don't have it, and I don't need to put something out on it, because last thing I need to do is completely slam someone's product and then just, cause a massive division for them and a problem for them. At the same time, I want to make sure I serve our audience. I want to make sure that I tell them what I like and what I don't like. So that hasn't happened in the last probably 3 years, at least, where we haven't had to have that conversation. But I did make one brand quite upset one time by giving a very honest review that they did not enjoy. So
I assume your audience is savvy enough where they can see who is participating and who isn't participating and potentially draw their own conclusions. Have you ever been surprised when you've given the heads up to somebody and they're like, we're totally good with it, we just want you to give your straight 2 cents, and If you're going to flame us a little bit, then okay. No pun intended.
Yeah, I mean, not terribly surprised, but I think it really comes down to I want to make sure that when someone spends good hard-earned money on a piece of barbecue gear, which let's be honest, I mean, we need it to cook, but really it's a recreational activity. It's something that we enjoy doing. It's something that's a lot of fun. And if you're going to spend hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars on something, it better be fun and useful for you. Because if it's not going to be fun and useful, they're not going to come back to the brand. They're not going to come back to the product. They're going to flame it to every friend that they know.
Yeah.
And it's going to become something that's going to be a loss for everyone. So I would rather them go into this and say, hey, you know what? I watched one of David's videos over at the Barbecue Lab, and I watched 8 griddles or 8 pizza ovens or 8 pellet grills. And the one that really connected and resonated with me was this one. So I want to try that out because I can see that that's really kind of got what I'm after and what I'm looking for. That's really one of our goals is I want people to find the right gear, and I want them to learn how to use it. And then I want them to be able to create community and gather a tribe around them around food and fire. That's really what we're about. So, I mean, really that first stage is finding the right gear. And if they can find the right gear, it's going to really help propel their journey on barbecue and outdoor cooking.
Anything you're working on right now that you're particularly excited about?
Yeah, I mean, these wireless thermometers that have been out right now, these things are taking the world by storm. A couple of brand new releases that are coming out. We've been doing a lot of work with those. And so we've got a really big head-to-head coming together of all of the major wireless thermometers. And so the testing for that has been fast and furious, but that's been a lot of fun.
Well, maybe when that's ready for release, after you get it published to the YouTubes, we could have you back on and dig into a little bit more here on this show.
Yeah, I know there's a lot of people with a lot of questions about those wireless probes. And I love that they're commenting on YouTube videos because it's even helping us know what it is that they want to see us test. And it's been fascinating data getting back on all these things. But as far as the channel goes, I mean, the things that we're working on right now are, you know, like I said, we're in a third of an acre, which is nice in a suburb, but with 70 to 80 reviews per year, it's a problem. We have a space problem. And so we'd love to find some room out in the country where we could put up a nice steel building and be able to kind of move things out there to be able to operate out in the wild, put out a nice new outdoor kitchen and film some stuff around that, have a few indoor studio sets, place to store things. So that's where we're heading. But finding land right now is problematic in our area. It's not exactly, I mean, it's the Midwest. I mean, you would think there's a cornfield and a soybean field in every corner of every place that you look. You'd think you could go find 10 or 20 acres pretty easy, but it has not been the easiest thing I've ever done.
Farmland is farmland, as they say.
It is.
Yeah. Dave Gafford is joining us here from the Barbecue Lab. You can follow him on the Instagrams, Barbecue Labs, and you can also subscribe over on YouTube, which is youtube.com/@thebarbecue-lab, and that's barbecue, BARBECUE, where 106,000 or so of you are already subscribed to him. Dave, really appreciate the time this evening, and let's circle back up and revisit the wireless thermometer head-to-head once you have it done.
Sounds great, Greg. Appreciate it.
You got it. Appreciate you. David Gafford right there from the Barbecue Lab, the website, thebarbecuelab.com. And as he said, if you're not getting the full information or you're not getting a full complement of information from the YouTube, they do have the website. And there's a lot more information over there as well to supplement. So look for that. David Gafford. I had the pleasure of meeting him in person when I was at the ThermoWorks event there a month or two ago out there in at American Fork, Utah. Look for Dave in a semi-recurring fashion if he's so inclined. A lot of great stuff on that website. Darren Carter is ready to go. Before we get to him, talk to you quickly about Big Papa Smokers. Are you ready to score that perfect 180 on chicken or ribs or pork or brisket? Big Papa Smokers has you covered for the best rubs, sauces, injections in the business for a limited time. Use promo code BBQ Central and get 10% off all Big Papa Smokers products. That's right, 10% off secret ingredients the championship teams swear by and win with weekend in and weekend out. Don't miss out on the incredible offer while it exists, whether you're aiming for a grand championship at your next barbecue contest or just looking to take that barbecue and grilling game to the next level of awesomeness. Remember, your food just got better with Big Papa. Offer valid through October 31st. Visit BigPapaSmokers.com. That's promo code BBQ Central for 10% off your order, your whole order at that. All right, Darren Carter from Carter's Barbecue to close. Stick around. I'll be right back.
You're listening to the Barbecue Central Show. Whole packers, full racks, legs and thighs, injecting butts. If you've never heard this before, you might think you found the best XXX show ever. Let's get back to the most homoerotic host out there today, Craig Rimpey.
And we welcome you back, and we thank David Gafford for joining us last segment over at the Barbecue Lab, thebarbecuelab.com, his website. This portion of the show being brought to you by JRE Tobacco, a family-run brand, a vertically integrated manufacturer known for its authentic Corojo tobacco, grown at the JRE Tobacco Farm in Honduras, the original Cuban seed of Corojo. Find a retailer near you by visiting jretobacco.com. Helping me close the show tonight, a fellow that made his debut on this show back in March. We learned about his food truck business here in the greater Cleveland area, and tonight we talk about his feature in a recent miniseries that highlights their journey. I'm happy to welcome back our pal, co-owner of Carter's Barbecue, Darren Carter, joining us here on the show. Darren, appreciate you joining me once more. Before we get into the docu-series, miniseries, whatever the hell you call it, we have a YouTube poll question of the week that we're asking everybody, which is this: have you tried a bottle of Doug Scheiding's Rogue Cookers rubs yet?
No.
Oh. 83%, by the way, saying no, they have
83%. That's probably about the same that has tried mine. So we're in good company.
I said, Doug, don't be disheartened. Think of it as more as almost 20% of people have at least bought one bottle of your 3 bottles of existing rub.
One bottle at a time.
That's
But
right.
he probably is. I'm about to have mine mass produced. So probably another month or two, I will be, putting it out there a lot more. Now I just do small batches, but we're going to go to a co-packer and put them out in the streets and see how the streets like them.
How are you doing it now? You're not doing it in your house, are you?
No, well, not in the house, but we're doing it in our central kitchen, our commissary kitchen.
Yeah.
Yep. Pack them up, bottle them up, shake them up. I do the labels, everything. So, and then we sell them either on the website or just, where we pop up or things like that. But the sauce
I don't think it would ever be, if you go to the co-packer, I don't think it's going to be as good. I mean, I know it's a pain in the ass and you're the one doing all the labor and everything else, and it makes more sense and everybody else does it that way. But I think you get it out of your hands, I think it ends up being different.
Well, it's a little bit, but thankfully for the people that we're working with, we got samples. I'm like, no, that's not it. Let's do this different or something. So we have something that is what I could tell very little difference in. So if they keep that, going, we'll be okay. The most important thing is the sauce, which we were doing last because it's going to be the most expensive, but it is what everybody kind of really wants, but it's the most expensive. So let's just get the rubs out the way, hopefully build up something and then get the sauce out there later. And that's probably going to be a much more tedious process than the rubs were.
Is the rub called Carter's Crack?
That's a good one. I may do that for one of them. Yeah. One of them is called, it's, what am I? Oh, I just have a pork and chicken rub. I call it. It's probably going to be the all-purpose one. And then I have like a garlic. I can't say garlic lovers, but it's a garlic one. I love that. I put that on everything.
You were featured in a web series, miniseries type thing. Tell me about the general idea of the program, and we can build into, how you were approached and how you got into it.
GoDaddy, of course, many people know GoDaddy as a website company, but they do so much more for small businesses. But for the last, this is the 5th season. We are part of the 5th season. They've had this docu-series called Made in America. And basically they've gone around to different cities in America and highlighted small businesses to see their triumphs, their struggles, because as their tagline says, they believe that everybody could be made in America and they should be able to make their own way. So they kind of journey that with different businesses. The first 4 seasons they did cities. So they've done Baltimore, they've done Phoenix, a couple other places. I don't know the other ones before that. They skipped my mind. But this year they did a state. So they did Ohio. So we were one of the main features, along with another one down in Portsmouth, Ohio. It's a vintage antique company, Gray Brush Vintage. We both had our own episodes, and then other businesses in Ohio, they were sprinkled throughout a couple of the episodes. So they did a whole state this time, and it was pretty good because we got a chance to see what a lot of other people were doing. And all of us have went through a program via GoDaddy, and this is kind of how we got into it. They showed us from a GoDaddy program, an empowered program, and this was just a program about building websites and finding out how to do that right. And they looked at folks, they saw folks, we got calls, and we just kept getting calls and just kept getting calls and getting calls, and finally, they told us what this would be about, and are you willing to do this? And we said, hell yeah, let's do it. Let's go.
When you get the offer, is it initially striking and romantic and exciting, or are you like, hey, this is great, but we really need to drill down into a lot of this stuff? Because this isn't 15 years ago where barbecue was getting that initial spotlight shown. You had barbecue pitmasters coming out. I think at one point it was even on CBS on a Memorial or a Labor Day on a Sunday during like NASCAR or whatever. I mean, it was crazy, right? So fast forward to 15 years to where we are now. It's a different game. I would like to think it's a bit of a savvier game. I had done a interview with Rashid Phillips not too long ago, and we talked exclusively about TV shows and what's involved, what you should be aware of before the shooting starts. So what did you and your wife talk about as you're like, yeah, let's do it? What other conversations took place?
That was the year when this came to us. I was maybe 6 to 8 months into being full-time.
Wow.
Where I quit my job that year. So when that came, I was like, let's go. I didn't care. I mean, it was the glorious romantic, you know what I mean? We didn't necessarily really think, we did go over the contract. We did do over those type of things. We didn't really see anything at the time that we knew would, pop out at us or anything. There was one thing that we, asked to change within the contract, and they did gracefully because, again, they believe in a small business. But yeah, we were like, let's go. Looking back, probably would do it again, just a little differently, probably. We have things with AI coming now. So your likeness can be forever in a day. I could be old and gray, but young Darren can be still doing something. So as a small business, and just as having our, what they call intellectual property, moving forward in different things that comes up, I would dove into that a lot more. Cause I really don't want to be old or dead and have a young guy selling something, and I'm not even around, or, you know what I mean? Being on a show and, barbecue pit masters, here's Darren Carter. And wait, what? You know what I mean? So, and that AI stuff really bothers me. So, so yeah. That would be done differently.
How happy were you with the finished product?
Dude, I am ecstatic about it. And you go into it nervous because we have no creative control. Only control we have is just none. We get up and we do what we do. But during the process, and seeing some of the ones before us, we loved how their stories came out. And the producer, Sophie, she was a wonderful woman who got a lot out of us as we were filming. The main thing she said was just trust me. That's kind of hard nowadays to be trusting people,
Right.
especially if you don't know them, whatever. But we've had a lot of conversations. It was like, well, okay. She wants to put, the company and our triumphs and our failures in the best light possible. And that's what she did, I believe. It came out to be, knowing all we shot, we think, oh man, that could have been, or that could have been, but that's not my creative process. You know what I mean? But the final product, I love it. And of course, I've been sharing it forever. Want everybody to see it and like it and comment and everything. But it's a brief, 4-part series. They're no longer than 14 minutes long each episode, and we're all of us are in episode 1. Episode 2 is ours alone. Episode 3 is Gray Brush, and then episode 4 is us and Gray Brush finishing up some processes, and then finishing out with ECDI here again, which all this came about through that, talking about their program. So I love it. I mean, I see it, and it is something to get emotional about with me, because I see it, I'm like, wow, that was us. We did this and we went through that. And then it was a year ago. So to see how far we've come since then, it's amazing. But I wouldn't change that, for the world. She did an excellent job, their whole staff, how they cut, what they pasted. We know some things that may have been boom, boom, but just still in general, it was a wonderful process. And it was a wonderful turnout.
Yeah.
At the end, the process was kind of aggravating sometimes, but you never know what it's going to be like when cameras are following you 24 hours a day.
What's the expectation at this point? Now that it's out, people are starting to see it more and more. What's the expectation from your side as far as what might happen or extra things that might come out of the woodwork that you weren't expecting?
As always, the more what do small businesses need? Exposure, right?
Yeah, right.
So that is the number one thing. And this isn't, it is localized, but yet it isn't. I mean, YouTube, this is going to be there forever. People can see this now and whenever. They were like, hey, I remember that when I saw that show and they were in Cleveland. Let me look them up. And hopefully, again, we've gotten some increased traffic on the website. I won't know fully how it impacts, what's the name wise. Some people told me they saw it on there, but right now I'm pushing it so much. Hopefully I'm expecting people to see it.
Yeah.
So, hopefully it'll come with customers, with sales and everything. But what we really, really want exposure, being a new small business, the best exposure or the more good exposure that we can get. I'm not going to turn that down. So, and then that can turn into many different things. I can get a call for, hey, we're a company right here. We got about 1,000 people. Can you cater for us? Where's the contract?
Yeah.
So we hope, I don't know at what, I don't know how, I've even reached out to like last year's, it was 2 years ago for them, but through the season 4 featured, the featured businesses in Baltimore, and, to see how it did for them. And for all of them, it did pick up traffic, especially web traffic, and then from there, you got to cultivate that, to keep up on it and cultivate that. And hopefully from that increased traffic, even numbers wise, you can get some business out of that. So it can be very, very helpful that way. And I hope it does the same for us.
Darren Carter joining us.
And plus,
here.
it got me on the show with you again. So
yeah, sure, a big deal. You can see the web traffic. I mean, you can probably feel the web traffic just flowing into the computer and the website.
Yes, sir.
From where can people go to watch it? Just YouTube?
Yeah, you could go to GoDaddy's, GoDaddy's channel, or you can go to any of my, you can go to Carter's Barbecue 216, Instagram, and it's in my link tree. So if you go to my Carter's Barbecue 216 on IG, just hit that link tree, and then it's the first thing that pops up. And then that's the playlist, so you can just watch them all. You can see that the whole series in less than an hour.
Summer's almost
I know we got
over.
shortage since then.
Summer's
Yeah.
almost over. Where are you going to be at in the next couple of weeks?
Oh, we got a pretty busy next couple of weeks. Tomorrow, well, whoever sees this, if they're in Cleveland, tomorrow will be, which is going to be Wednesday.
Wednesday.
Yes, it's going to be Wednesday. We're going to be down at Walnut Wednesdays, which is downtown Cleveland. It's for the lunchtime, 11:30 to 1:30. Then we're going to be up at Beechwood Truck Park at 4 to close out the evening. And then Lakewood Truck Park on Thursday, and then Saturday we're at Willowick. They have a city festival that we're going to be at from like 12 to 6. But next week is going to be cool too, because we are one of the finalists to be and to take part of the Taste of Black Cleveland. That's going to be at Rocket Mortgage Fieldhouse Thursday the 22nd. So we'll be one of 28 vendors down there that people can, we're going to be in the food truck and caterer category, that people can sample our food and vote and see, who's the Black Taste of Cleveland. And Rock the Block, South Euclid. That'll be the 23rd and 24th, that Friday and Saturday. We'll be there for both days. So these next 2 weeks are going to be sleepless. How about that?
Yeah, certainly sounds like it. So hopefully I can get out to one of those events or a multitude of those events and independently judge how good your food is right there, because that's what you want, some shithead coming and telling you how good your food is. Darren Carter joins us here on this show, the website cartersbbq216.com, or you can follow him on the gram, cartersbbq216. Darren, appreciate the insight on the web series over there with GoDaddy, and good luck here over the next coming weeks, and we'll talk to you soon.
Always appreciate you, man. Thank you. And our condolences, our family's condolences to yours. Anything you need, man, just let me know.
Appreciate it. Darren Carter right there, quality human, doing the barbecue food truck thing right here in Cleveland. So if you're going to be around the greater Cleveland area here over the next couple weeks, hit me up. I can get you his schedule and where he's going to be if you want to try out Carter's Barbecue. It's a not miss kind of a thing. I'm all caught up business-wise, so let's go ahead and see if we can't actually make it out on time. We'll be back to wrap the show right after this. Stick around. We'll be right back.
Let's get back to a guy who has more experience giving you his opinion than he actually has cooking. Once again, here's your host, Greg Rempe.
And we thank Darren Carter for joining us last segment. Carter's BBQ216.com, the website, Instagram, Carter's BBQ216, CARTERS, Carter's BBQ216, either way. A lot of good information there. And he's out doing this food truck thing in full swing here over the next couple of weeks, as he had just mentioned. So if you're going to be around here, like I had mentioned, why not try him out? See what he's all about. All right, let's go ahead and make tracks all the way back in the first hour. We had Meathead talking about brining, osmosis, diffusion, injections, all that. We missed the pickling portion. I meant to do the pickling. Robert Moss joined us after that, robertfmoss.com. He's got a new best new barbecue list coming out in Southern Living Magazine in the next couple of weeks, so we'll talk about that next month, see who leads the pack on that. Second hour, David Gafford from the Barbecue Lab joined us for the first time ever, and it won't be the last time, I can tell you that. He's got a new wireless thermometer head-to-head roundup coming up we'd like to dive into once that's all released and ready to go. And then closing it out, Darren Carter from Carter's Barbecue. Carter's Barbecue 216 on the Instagram or .com. All right, big show planned for you next week. It's week 3. Wes Wright is in. There'll be a quarterly guest, probably a Susie Bullock sighting, amongst others. So how do I always leave you? September 11th, 2001. I will never forget. Until next Tuesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, this is your program host and proud U.S. American, Greg Rempe. Good night now, and shalom!
Hello, this is Jenny Bell from Clarington, Ohio, and I'm listening to Barbecue Central.